Just a quiet old man at the gym, until the young bodybuilders learned who he really was. It was 6 a.m. at Iron Paradise Gym, and the morning crowd was just filtering in. Among the 20-something bodybuilders and fitness influencers, 65-year-old Frank Martinez looked completely out of place. Gray-haired, wearing a faded navy t-shirt and simple gym shorts, he moved with the careful, measured steps of someone his age. The young guys barely noticed him as he quietly made his way to the pull-up station in the corner. "Old-timers probably here for some light cardio," whispered Jake, a 25-year-old personal trainer with biceps the size of tree trunks. His buddies, Marcus, Tyler, and Connor, all fitness models with thousands of Instagram followers, chuckled as they loaded up the bench press with 315 pounds. They were the gym's unofficial kings, the ones everyone looked up to, the ones who set the standard for strength and masculinity. Frank began his routine with simple stretches, his movements deliberate and controlled. The young men continued their loud workout, dropping weights dramatically, grunting for effect, making sure everyone knew they were the alphas of this space. "Hey, Pops," Jake called out, his voice dripping with condescending friendliness. "You sure you don't want to start on the treadmill? This section's for serious lifting." Frank looked up calmly, his weathered face showing no emotion. "I'm fine here, son. Thank you." The words seemed to irritate Jake, who was used to being addressed with respect, even reverence, in this gym. "Son?" he laughed, flexing his arms. "Look around, old man. See anyone here who looks like your son?" His crew laughed appreciatively. Marcus, not to be outdone, added, "Maybe you should try the senior center down the street. They probably have some nice lightweights there." The gym had gone quiet now, other members sensing the tension, some pulling out phones to record what they assumed would be an embarrassing moment for the older man. Frank continued stretching, seemingly unbothered by the growing audience and the escalating taunts. "I appreciate the concern," he said quietly, "but I've been working out longer than you boys have been alive." This brought more laughter from the group. Tyler, desperate to get in on the action, pointed to the pull-up bar above Frank. "Tell you what, Grandpa, you do 10 pull-ups, real ones, not the half-reps old guys usually do, and we'll leave you alone. If you can't, you grab your little towel and find another gym." The crowd pressed closer, phones recording. Someone had already started a live stream. This was content gold, young studs putting an old man in his place. Frank looked up at the bar, then at the expectant faces around him. The same faces he'd seen 1,000 times before. Young, confident, certain of their own invincibility. He'd worn that face once, before life taught him what real strength meant. 10 pull-ups? He asked quietly. "That's all?" Jake smirked. "Make it interesting, 20. And if you fail, you not only leave, but you admit to everyone here that you don't belong." The gym owner, Pete, pushed through the crowd, clearly uncomfortable. "Hey guys, come on, let's just—" But Frank raised a hand. "It's all right, Pete. 20 pull-ups it is." He approached the bar with the same careful, measured steps. The young men were already celebrating their victory, planning their viral video captions. Frank reached up, his movements still deliberate, still controlled. At 65, his frame wasn't what it once was, but something in his posture, something in the way he gripped that bar, made a few people in the crowd pause. He hung there for a moment, testing his grip. Then he began. The first pull-up was smooth, controlled, his chin clearing the bar with inches to spare. The second. The third. By the 5th pull-up, the laughter had stopped. By the 10th, the gym was silent except for the sound of Frank's controlled breathing. His form was perfect. No swinging, no momentum, just pure controlled power. 15, 16, 17. Jake's smirk had disappeared entirely. These weren't the struggled pull-ups of an old man trying to prove a point. These were the pull-ups of someone who'd done thousands of them, someone for whom this was as natural as breathing. 20. Frank held the final position for a moment, then dropped down with the same controlled grace he'd shown throughout. He wasn't even breathing hard. The silence stretched uncomfortably until someone in the crowd whispered, "Holy shit." Frank turned to face Jake and his crew, his expression unchanged. "Gentlemen, I believe that settles our arrangement." But Jake, his ego bruised and his image shattered in front of his followers, wasn't done. "Lucky set. Probably the first time you've done that in 20 years. He stepped closer to Frank, using his size advantage, trying to intimidate. "How about we make this really interesting? You and me, bench press. Let's see what you've really got, old-timer." The crowd murmured with excitement. This was escalating beyond what anyone had expected. Frank looked at the bench press station, loaded with Jake's 315 pounds. "That your max?" he asked quietly. Jake's chest puffed out. "Warm-up weight. But it'll be more than enough to show everyone what happens when senior citizens try to play with the big boys." Marcus and Tyler added more weight. 365 pounds. Nearly 100 pounds more than most men could handle, let alone a man Frank's age. Pete tried to intervene again. "Frank, you don't have to do this. These guys are just—" "It's fine, Pete," Frank said, his voice still calm. "I haven't had a good workout in weeks." As Frank approached the bench, something shifted in his demeanor. The careful, measured movements remained, but underneath them, something else emerged. Purpose, precision, the bearing of a man who'd spent decades in situations where failure meant death. He lay back on the bench, positioning himself with military precision. His grip on the bar was exactly shoulder width, his feet planted firmly on the ground, his shoulder blades retracted and planted. This wasn't the setup of a casual gym goer. This was the setup of someone who understood leverage, breathing, and the biomechanics of power. The gym held its breath as Frank unracked the weight. 365 pounds, enough to crush most men, held steady above his chest. He lowered it slowly, with perfect control, until it touched his shirt. Then, with a smooth, powerful drive that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside him, he pressed it up. No struggle, no strain, just controlled, devastating power. He racked the weight and sat up, looking at Jake's stunned face. "Your turn," he said simply. Jake approached the bar with considerably less confidence. He'd benched this weight before, but never with this much pressure, never with this many eyes on him. He struggled through one rep, his form breaking down, his face red with exertion. When he racked it, his hands were shaking. "Impressive," Frank said, standing up. "When I was your age, I thought I was strong too." Something in his tone made Jake step back. There was no mockery in it, no condescension, just a quiet authority that made everyone in the gym listen. "I thought size and youth were everything. Took me a while to learn that real strength comes from somewhere else entirely." Connor, trying to salvage something for their group, stepped forward. "Yeah? And where's that, Pops? Your motivational poster collection?" Frank looked at him with the same calm expression. "Real strength comes from carrying your wounded teammate 2 miles through enemy territory when you've been shot 3 times yourself. It comes from staying awake for 72 hours straight, because lives depend on your vigilance. It comes from facing situations where failure doesn't just mean embarrassment. It means everyone you care about dies." The gym had gone completely silent. Frank's voice never raised, never became dramatic. He spoke like he was discussing the weather. "It comes from 35 years as a Navy SEAL, from operations in places whose names are still classified, from watching better men than any of us die for causes they believed in." Jake's face had gone pale. The word SEAL hung in the air like a physical presence. Someone in the crowd whispered, "Oh my God." Frank continued, his weathered hands clasped behind his back in a posture that suddenly seemed less like an old man's caution and more like a soldier's discipline. It comes from learning that true strength isn't about what you can lift or how you look in the mirror. It's about what you're willing to sacrifice for something bigger than yourself. He looked around at the circle of young faces, most of them now avoiding eye contact. You boys are strong, stronger than most. But strength without purpose, without respect, without honor? That's just vanity wearing muscle as a costume. Marcus found his voice, but it came out as barely a whisper. We didn't know. Of course you didn't, Frank said, not unkindly. How could you? I'm just a quiet old man at the gym. But that's the thing about assuming. It makes you miss what's right in front of you. He picked up his worn gym bag, the same deliberate movements that had characterized everything else about him. But now the crowd saw them differently. The careful steps weren't the cautious movements of age. They were the precise, economical movements of someone who'd spent decades where wasted motion could mean death. As he headed toward the exit, Pete called out, "Frank, you don't have to leave. This is your gym too." Frank paused and turned back. "I'm not leaving because of them, Pete. My workout's done." He looked at Jake and his crew one more time. "Gentlemen, thank you for the reminder. It's been a while since I had to prove anything to anyone. Felt good to remember what I'm capable of." Jake stepped forward, his earlier arrogance completely gone. "Sir, we owe you an apology. A huge one. We were way out of line." Frank studied the young man's face for a moment. "You know what you owe me?" "Nothing. You know what you owe yourselves?" "Better. You've got gifts, strength, youth, opportunity. Don't waste them on making others feel small. Use them to lift people up." He shouldered his bag. "And Jake? Work on your form. You're compensating with ego where you should be building with discipline." As Frank walked toward the door, something remarkable happened. One by one, every person in that gym, from the biggest bodybuilders to the newest members, stepped back and created a path for him. Not out of fear, but out of respect. The same respect they should have shown from the beginning. At the door, Frank paused and turned back one more time. "Oh, and boys, next time you want to challenge someone, maybe ask about their story first. You might be surprised what you learn." The door closed behind him, leaving a gym full of people who would never look at assumptions the same way again. Jake stared at the pull-up bar where 20 perfect reps had just shattered his worldview. Marcus looked at the bench where 365 pounds had been moved, with the ease of decades of discipline. Tyler and Connor just stood there, processing the fact that they'd tried to humiliate a man who'd spent his life in service to his country. Pete finally broke the silence. Frank Martinez, 3 tours in Afghanistan, 2 in Iraq, Silver Star, Bronze Star, Purple Heart. Been coming here for 5 years, always polite, always respectful. Never once mentioned his service. He looked around at the stunned faces. "Maybe next time you ask before you assume." The gym slowly returned to normal activity, but the lesson lingered. Phones that had been ready to record an old man's humiliation instead captured something entirely different. A masterclass in quiet dignity, earned respect, and the kind of strength that can't be measured in pounds. And somewhere across town, Frank Martinez continued his day, probably unaware that the video of his 20 pull-ups and gentle lecture would reach millions of people within hours, reminding them all that heroes don't always look like what we expect. Sometimes they look like quiet old men at the gym, until the moment they show us who they really are. What's your story? Have you ever misjudged someone based on appearances? Tell us in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that remind us that real strength comes from the heart.